Oh, well, that was fun. So yeah, I guess this game's been on my mind quite a lot lately due to circumstances, and I have been playing it on and off for several months now, so let's do it. DCUO, the MMO, the game review, right here, right now. Although, let me get this one completely out of context referential joke out of the way just before we get rolling.
Ready to get back to the good fight?
And cue opening credits. I want to start by going back in time a ways. I lived a few miles from a comic book shop while growing up, and to be honest, I wasn't much of a DC collector. I was more into Marvel. I liked the X-Men, the West Coast Avengers, the New Mutants. Like you're really surprised. I bring up the New Mutants because I really liked some of the more wild artwork of guys like Bill Sienkiewicz. Sienkiewicz? When they let him loose on stuff, it was just mind-blowingly good. His art actually got me into stuff like Eastman and Laird's black and white noir work, before the Turtles were kid-friendly. Then in a sort of strange backdoor kind of way, the original graphic novel for The Dark Knight, which the art made the grim future world feel dark and uncomfortable. We hadn't been beaten to death with the cyberpunk theme at the time, so it was still pretty original. What I'm getting at is I like comic books, that's all I'm saying. Actually, there was some DC stuff I did like. Anyone of my generation will remember getting up at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday just to watch cartoons all morning long. One of them was the Super Friends, and it was cheesy. Super cheesy. But I'd sit there with a box of cereal, a big cup of milk, and I'd watch it as the sun rose. No, I still don't know how the hell that dog fits into it to this day. I mean, there were other things on TV too, but no, Super Friends is the childhood memory. And there's one other thing that really made me like DC. No, not the Keaton movie. This was the DC Universe done right, and actually this is probably where I should pick up the storyline here. It's rare to see a kids cartoon that's not made for kids, but here it is. Batman the Animated Series made it really cool to be a grown-up who liked comic book heroes. So what if you took Batman the Animated Series, the 1990s version, and turned it into an MMO? Well, that's kind of what they did. DC Universe Online was released in 2011 as a subscription game. After about a year of its release, it went free-to-play. Like, almost complete access to the game free-to-play. To be honest, I don't even know where to begin on this, so I'll start with the overarching storyline, and yeah, they pretty much had me at the opening cinematic. Absolutely jaw-dropping, doesn't even begin to describe it. But it does set the story. Watch the whole thing for yourself, but here's what's the important part. I'll let Lex Luthor tell the story from here.
Brainiac had returned. For years he'd been stealing the powers of Earth's protectors, but we were too busy fighting amongst ourselves to see the danger. This is my past, but your future. And it means the end of humanity, so together, we must change it!
What have you done, Luthor?
Given you a fighting chance. I've stolen Brainiac's exobytes and released them into Earth's atmosphere. They hold the powers stolen from the heroes and villains of my time, and will bestow them on anyone they contact.
The storyline is not purely canon from the comic books. I've lost track of the DC Universe over the years, but if you can accept the game for what it is and not what the comic books say it should be, it's all cool. And pretty much for after this, you're dropped into character creation from here. People tend to make a really big deal about the character creation process in MMOs like this, and I understand. But in reality, in a fight, I'm not exactly examining your armor piece to see what went with what. I'm more trying to look at the mobs and trying not to die. So we're just going to gloss over it for this video, but it's a pretty simple process in DCUO.
Targets identified. Select gender and body type.
The character creation system has actually led to a drinking game on my live stream. When you see a Batman-style character, you take a drink. When you see a Marvel-inspired character, that's another drink. And if either of those has a name incorporating part of the original character, that's 2 drinks. Needless to say, alcohol poisoning is actually a pretty real possibility by night's end on my live stream. And if you're lazy, you can pick a template based on an existing DC character, and this is where most of the alcohol comes from. But if you're into customization, and really who isn't, the system is actually pretty foolproof. It leads you step by step through the powers, weapons, costume choices. Some powers and weapons do need to be purchased with real money in the cash shop, as do some weapons. So, quite literally, if you want to be a part of the Green Lantern Corps, you gotta pay for it. Everything from styles to color coordination is step by step if you fiddle with all the options presented to you, and in fact, the hardest part of character creation, finding a name that hasn't already been taken.
Error.
The character creation process is not nearly as in-depth with other superhero MMOs, and in fact, you're going to see a lot of carbon copies of yourself running around with the same armor, different colorways. Then again, I am a WoW player, so I'm kind of used to that by now. But the one thing I did find, when I was looking up for best build, almost everybody said, well, there's not really a best build, just go with whatever you think is cool and it'll work. So if you want to make your character a pink and blue robot with an afro hairdo wearing feathery wings and a two-handed sledgehammer as your main weapon, dude, go for it. It'll be cool. It's painfully obvious this game wants to be shipped with an instruction manual. You can get all the info on wikis, of course, but if you're a one-screen player, that can get really annoying really fast. So here's the absolute basics on a PC. Melee attacks are your left mouse button, range is your right. WASD does your movement, number keys do powers, block and stun break is on your left shift key. There you go. The rest of the game will teach you some stuff as you play in the opening levels, but not everything. Like if you're an acrobat, if you hold spacebar after you jump into the air, you glide. They just neglect to tell you this in-game. As you gain weapon skills, your attack click patterns get more complex, and it's all based on timing and visual cues. It's so bad, I've actually made cheat sheets with the click combos because each weapon has different combos, even if they're kind of themed similarly. Now the combat itself can get pretty chaotic pretty quick. Since your turning is tied with the mouse movement, it's easy to shift and get new targets, giving combat a really nice smooth flow. This is good and bad in that it gives you a really heroic feel because you're fighting lots of enemies at once. But it's bad because you don't quite realize that you're out of health until you get knocked out. But the combat is a lot more intuitive than other superhero MMOs that I've played. Oh, and one thing about the opening level, I'm not going to do spoilers so that you can play it for yourself and not know everything that's going to happen. The game will teach you, though, that curiosity is well rewarded. In-world, you'll find circles like these. They'll tell you more of the story, and they have actually rewards.
Vicky Vale on Tlaylock, the god of water.
Now, searching around in any given instance, you'll find these glowy treasure chests. You break them, and you get good stuff like healing colas and armor pieces. In fact, you can start the game stark naked, and by the end of the tutorial, you got a full set of armor. Except for trousers for some reason. You can just buy those at the starting vendor from selling the trash you pick up along the way, or getting briefs in your style tab if you want to be modest. And actually, that's one part about the game that really kind of gets to me, is that all the healing potions in this game are colas. I mean, come on. I mean, who's going to make themselves feel better by drinking a can of soda? Okay, on to the game review. To describe the game in one word, that word would probably have to be crowded. Effectively, both platforms of PC and PS3 has two servers, a PvP and a PvE server. The game does compensate for that, sometimes a little too much. Enemies respawn insanely fast because the dev team knows the game's going to be crowded. It can seem like dozens of people are trying to do the same mission you are. However, if you assist another player, you get the same rewards as they do, so help them out. Or just wait 10 seconds, bad guys respawn. And if someone near you gets knocked out, anyone can revive them. Just stand close, press E. Teamwork is built into the gameplay. Use it. Biggest advice I can give you about missions though, the moment you've achieved the goal, get out of the way. Climb a building, get out of range. Don't worry, everyone you're playing with understands. Once you're out of harm's way, open your journal, get your new mission data.
Scarecrow's thugs are as crazy as he is.
The exception are instances. Once you're in an instance, it's yours and yours alone, so take your time if you're an explorer type. Every instance has a treasure chest somewhere, and it'll get you upgrades or at least armor styles. You also have raid content with 4 people trying to achieve a goal in a really large instance, and that's a theme in the game. The main explorable world, it just feels huge, and it actually kind of has the feeling of a city trying to get on with business after being rocked by an invasion force. It actually feels like a living city, mostly. I mean, Gotham, for example, they got hit pretty hard, but it's obvious that people are trying to get on with things. Well, at least as well as they can in Gotham. As you travel the whole city, the traffic flows on the streets, people are actually walking around. It's actually pretty hard to find an area without something going on at street level. So some related advice since I'm here, travel off of the streets. If you're a lowbie, you're probably going to find yourself going through a high-level fight and you're just going to get mauled. I should probably mention this here. I've been playing DCUO for quite a little bit of time, and I do have one character at end content right now. And the one thing I found is that you can get to level 10 in a couple of hours just by following the missions. And in a couple of sessions, you can reach end content a lot faster than other MMOs. But the one thing I had a problem with, I got to this level, I looked around and went, well, now what? Again, lack of instruction manuals really are going to hurt here. There are daily quests that you can grind to get marks for higher armor to survive the high-level content. Well, without it, well, let's just say there's a huge jump at endgame. The game goes from, hey, this isn't so bad, to, holy hell, I'm dead before I even got into the fight, with no easing up from one difficulty to the next without grinding up to that point. I also like these little mini racing games that they have. At easy level, these are really good tutorials teaching you how to utilize your movement powers. At later levels, yeah, it's kind of hard. These are good side missions to do if you're tired of doing your dailies and you're really not in the mood to do any more story missions. One thing I really do enjoy about this game is that each one of these missions take about half an hour, 45 minutes to do. So it's kind of like reading a regular comic book. You pick it up, you go through the story, you enjoy it, you put it back down, you go about your day. To that end, the game plays out like a comic-based cartoon. The voice acting can be a little over the top, but it works. It's a comic book. It should be over the top.
No! Impossible! We never lose! Must fight on!
But that said, some of the voice acting, a little flat and incredibly repetitive at worst.
Thanks for your help with Scarecrow. He certainly can mess with your head. I'll wrap up here and then meet you back at the station.
The storyline is actually very comic book-esque. Stories end with the good guy handcuffing the bad guy or the bad guy setting up the whatever, but a lot of things are to be continued but never heard from again after the bad guy escapes. The stories link together in a believable way, and at the end levels, it seems like the Brainiac story arc is kind of being ignored. I haven't taken in the DLC yet, but from what I see, those aren't dealing with the invasion arc either, which is a constant MMO problem I've noticed. Every expansion, they don't want to talk about the original story, they want to have the shiny brand new story instead. Progression or closure, I don't care which one you guys pick, just pick one and stick with it. We can all be happy with that. You know, actually, since I'm talking about the storyline, there's one other thing I should mention. In character creation, it's been pointed out to me that it's being done as part of the story, not as a separate mechanic. You're looking at the new hero or villain from the perspective of the exobytes downloading information into the person it finds, so even though in-game you interact with all the major players in the DC universe, this is your story.
Bane is trying to muscle in on the Falcone's turf. This just won't do. Let's contaminate their supplies, shall we?
They managed to fit in almost every major hero and villain.
Hey, it's my good friend, a total stranger.
They put Ambush Bug, and there's a reference to Crypto in there. But this isn't their story. This is your story. You play an everyman who, through random fate, obtains superpowers, and this changes your lives permanently. I mean, they even go as far as to say it directly on the villain side.
Then go speak with Triggerman Tony here in the nightclub. You're already on the payroll. Time to get to work.
So in a very direct way, you aren't just playing a famous superhero. You're playing yourself. The avatar on the screen isn't Superman, it's you. Which, in a way, explains why superhero MMO players are so passionate about the game they play. It's a common fantasy that I think most of us can relate to. I mean, let's face it, you don't see a bunch of 6-year-olds running around the backyard wearing 3-piece suits pretending to be accountants now, do ya? And I'll also admit that one of the flaws of the big storyline is that you're just a lackey and you're playing up to the big guys, you do all the hard work, they get all the credit, but under the circumstances of the storyline, that makes sense to me, and I'm willing to accept that. Alright, so let's talk about the final verdict. Yeah, definitely go for it. It's a free-to-play title that you can just pay for what you want, or you can go with a monthly subscription if you want to. And if you've never played MMOs before, it's actually a pretty good introduction. It's got some nice arcadey style combat, it's got some pretty interesting side missions, and it has a storyline that even if you're vaguely familiar with the DC universe, you'll be able to just jump right in and enjoy it, and it's all really cool. Now, I know I didn't really go in depth with the whole storyline and the mechanics. That's not really what I do. If you want that, you're probably going to want to go to see mmogrinder.net and take a look at their review of DCUO. He's probably doing a much better job at that than I ever could. And they got Mark Hamill do the voice of the Joker. Fanboy Squeeze!
Get some! Get some! You want some of this? Oh yeah, I'll give you more of this. There's more where that came from. Oh yeah, full auto, right there. Oh yeah, you want some of this? Who's your daddy?
Kitty, what are you doing?
Nothing.